So welcome everyone to our first in our Farm to School Procurement webinar series. We're really excited to have you here. We've got a jam-packed agenda today, as I think will be the case for all three of the webinars. And so with that, we are going to go ahead and jump in and do a few introductions and a little bit of housekeeping. So I'm Rebecca McMahon. I'm the Local Food System Program Administrator for K-State Research and Extension. And this webinar series is part of our Regional Food Systems Partnership Grant activities. And so we're really excited to offer this to all of you. I am kind of acting as host and kind of behind the scenes work. And Amanda Lindahl is also on here doing some of that. I'll let her introduce herself really quickly.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Amanda Lindahl, and I am our local food systems program coordinator with K-State Research and Extension. So happy to have you all here.
Thanks. And then other faces, some that you'll see more today and some in future webinars. Tom Buller with the Kansas Rural Center. Tom, do you want to unmute and introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. Hi, I'm Tom Buller with the Kansas Rural Center.
And then Barb and Aaron, do you want to go ahead and unmute and introduce yourselves?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barb Depew. I'm the Farm to Plate Program Director here at the Kansas State Department of Education with our child nutrition programs, and our offices are here in Topeka.
And I am Erin Davis. I work alongside Barb Depew with Child Nutrition and Wellness at the Kansas State Department of Education.
All right. Amanda, could you advance to the next slide, please? All right. So today's agenda, we're kind of doing a number of different things, almost like several shorter webinars kind of mushed in together. So we are going to do a couple polls here to get going. And then we're going to give a quick overview of some of our Kansas resources related to Farm to School from our three organizations. And then Barb and Aaron are going to kind of kick us off by giving a little bit of an overview of the broader Farm to School program and where some of the resources are on their pages. And then we will have Andrea Alma from USDA FNS Mountain Plains region joining us to walk us through some of the basics of Farm to School procurement. And then we'll go back to Barb and Aaron to hear a little bit more about what they've got going on. This is their busiest time of year, so we're really grateful for them finding time to wedge this webinar series into their calendar. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for some additional Q&A and discussion with all of you towards the end of the webinar. So with that, I'm going to start us off with some polls for just to get a little bit of a sense of where we're at. So our first poll question is, how would you rate your current level of knowledge in Farm to School or Kansas Farm to Plate? The next question is a multiple, like you can choose multiple options. So as many as apply to you, but what areas you're most currently interested in related to Farm to School? The third question is more on your personal side, so how you personally are supporting the use of local foods, and that could be just for your home use or work or whatever you want to do. And then the fourth question is where you personally purchase local products. So we're not really asking about Farm to School in that context, but just where you personally purchase local products, if at all. So I'll give everyone a minute or two to answer those poll questions. And then once you've finished the poll questions, it would be, I think, helpful for all of us, but particularly our presenters, if you could, in the chat, kind of introduce yourself quickly. So, hopefully your name is correct on your profile. But if you could tell us, maybe if you're affiliated with an organization, with Extension or with a school district, and where you're located around the state. And and things like that, that would be helpful to drop that into the chat. Okay, I think everyone has pretty much participated, so I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share those results. So current level of farm to school knowledge, a couple of folks marked it as high, a few moderate, lots of lows, and a few very lows. So hopefully we're going to bump that up by the end of today. Best reflects your current interests. So we have a few interested in selling, a few interested in purchasing, and a lot of folks that are interested in facilitating those purchasing relationships or helping producers or helping schools with that purchasing process. Personal support of local foods, a lot of folks growing or raising their own, purchasing local, again, a few selling, and a number in the education field. And then personally purchasing local products, a lot at the farmer's market, some at the grocery store directly from producers, one from food hubs, and one that doesn't currently purchase local products. So we're glad to have all of you here and joining us. All right. So with that, I think let's go into looking at a few of our resources. So to kind of, sometimes we do this back, we're doing this a little bit different direction than sometimes we save all the resources for the very end. And so today we're actually front loading the presentation with all of those resources. And so we've got a number of different things from our local food systems page, our Kansas Local Foods website, that you may find helpful when you're looking at farm to school information. And I think probably the most useful part about our website is that we try to link to everyone else. So if you look at our website, we have under the Cultivate Community section a page on farm to school. And we do include some great resources, but largely what we do is we link, you can see kind of at the bottom of the page, we link to the National Farm to School page, the Kansas Farm to Plate program with Barb and Aaron, and the Farm to School Network, as well as further down where you can't see it, to the Kansas Rural Center. Next slide. We also, kind of in that same section under Cultivate Community, have a school and youth programs page that is a little more focused on the school gardening side of things. And then if you just want to find out more about what we've got going on, if you want to be made aware of upcoming events and webinars and things like that, you can jump to the next slide, Amanda. We also do quarterly virtual town halls. We do an email list and things like that. So I've dropped a bunch of those different links into the chat so that you can take a look at those when you have time. And so next up, I'm going to turn it over to Tom and let him tell you a little bit about resources from the Kansas Rural Center related to farm to school.
Hi, everybody. Tom Buller here with the Kansas Rural Center. In case you haven't heard of us, we are a small nonprofit organization that is looking to promote the long-term health of the land and its people, really focused on building sustainable food and farming systems. And we feel like farm to school is an excellent way to do that and an excellent way to develop the local food system. If I go to the next slide, please. Maybe there's some text that'll pop up if you click again. Yeah, thank you. So I just want to highlight a few of the resources that we have at the Kansas Rural Center, specifically for farm to school. So we were part of a cohort that helped develop and get trained on some producer trainings nationally. So we're able to offer those around the state of Kansas. And so if you want to, have a group of producers that want a little bit more information, reach out to me and we can maybe help put something together to reach those producers. We do have some online farm to school resources here in this picture. We've got some clips of some of our videos. We have a link on our website there, kansasruralcenter.org, farm to school, that has a bunch of our different videos. We also have a YouTube playlist of farm to schools, but we've gone around the state and kind of looked at farm to school from a variety of different perspectives, from food safety to maybe the institutional perspective, with school nutrition employees talking about farm to school in their districts, to farmers who have successfully sold to school districts, talking about their stories. So I think it's a nice little set of videos if you want some information there. I will throw one more thing in the chat, especially for producers, but not necessarily only for producers. We and K-State Research and Extension are partners in the Heartland Regional Food Business Center. Right now, we do have an open call for business builder grants. So if you need some infrastructure, equipment improvements, and you're a farmer looking to sell to schools, you can look up that for more information or reach out to me sometime after the presentation. And then finally, we are celebrating our 45th year here and having a conference in November in Wichita, our annual Food and Farm Conference, and we will have a session featuring Farm to School there. If you'd like some more information, you can check out our website at kansasruralcenter.org. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. So next I'm going to turn it over to Barb and Aaron to talk about their programs a little bit more and some farm to school basics.
Thank you, Rebecca, and I'm glad to be with you this afternoon to share about how we can all work together to incorporate local foods into our child nutrition programs. And so on the next slide, it will share there what the types of programs that we have in child nutrition. And I'm sure most of you are familiar with the National School Lunch Program, and hopefully you have actually visited and seen one of these meals then in your areas, in your communities, in the school breakfast program, after school program, but also the summer program is what we have just finished. And obviously with having local fruits and vegetables in abundance in Kansas in the summer, this is a place where kids can eat for free, ages 1 to 18, at selected sites that are set up through sponsors. And the sponsors can be schools, they can be local government organizations, camps, private nonprofits, a variety of different sponsors besides our child nutrition program operators. And so at these sites, we do link then on our website there where they are and how kids can find meals in the summer. So a great place then for local fruits and vegetables, as well as all the other items that are on a healthy plate for this. And we also have our child and adult care food programs, and those two then operate across the state through centers, also many home providers that are out there adding local products then in their homes or in their centers too. So all of these are areas that our children across Kansas then can find nutritious meals and nutritious snacks then. So our program operators then work under the guidelines of USDA for the reimbursement of their meals. On the next slide, it actually shows how they work with the budget. And of course, then there is an important way that they can work together then to go ahead in their programs to decide then how much money is going to be spent then on those meals and snacks that they provide. So food typically is 40% of the budget that they are working with per meal, labor 40%, and then supplies 20%. So those local foods then will have to fit within that food budget that they have. Labor, which means that they may have to have some training or some areas of skills that they have not used in the past to use local foods, then also within that 40%. And then for supplies, it may mean that there may be some different equipment that might be needed that will be valuable in helping reduce the labor in some of the meal programs that we have out there. But they do operate then as a business. And so it is very important as they're working with producers or working with their sourcing of local that they're able to determine then where they are actually able to spend that money, and of course the value then of the money that they spend. So on the next slide then, the results that you see are a healthy plate. And I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the Kansas Healthy Plate, and of course the chili and cinnamon roll meal that you see here that has a lot of local ingredients that can fit into that. So again, sourcing local for our Kansas operators then can mean anything then from those fresh fruits and vegetables, but also we want local grains, protein sources, and dairy foods on our trays. And so that dairy obviously is local because our milk is local that is in our programs across the state. But again, there's a lot of other places that they can find local. It can be through their mainline distributors. They may be carrying local products. It could be from local farmers, local ranchers that are out in the areas. It could also be from their own, whether it be maybe a school board member that has an animal. It could be even a family member or a family garden that they may be able to work with. So again, there are many places that local can be found that may be right in their own communities. So we want to work with all of our area representatives, our partners across the state then, to be able to help cover the plate with local foods. So we also want to work with the ag programs that are in our schools, our FFA programs, also our FACS programs to educate about where local is, how local can be incorporated. Many of them are also kind of an ambassador for our programs when they are actually raising the animals or the fruits and vegetables in their programs, then to be able to put that onto the healthy meals across the state. The definition of local is something that is actually determined by each of our program operators, and it can be seasonal, so that it could be again across the state, it could be in their region, or it could be within their own community. So that is something that they are able to determine themselves then as far as how far they're going to look to get that local product. And it may depend then on what the product is and what the time of year that it is. So again, we can help. There is a geographic preference that is also available then for those that are bidding for products then to list then that geographic preference then when they are interested in going ahead and having a local product in that bid. Next slide. So we want you each to be able to find local. And so what we want you to help us do then is to connect with your providers that are in your areas. If you're looking for our child nutrition and wellness staff as a producer or as a partner, then we have our link here that is listed through KSDE at Data Central. And so that you can find whether it be the authorized representative, which is our main contact that we have through our child nutrition programs, the person that we work with directly. That may be a food service director, but it may also be a superintendent or a board representative, but they are listed then at this link here. And then two, you could find actually a nutrition manager at one of the sites if you're working. It doesn't have to be a district-wide program. The program operator that is doing the purchasing is who you would want to connect with, but it could be just in one of the school sites or at a child daycare. So these are, again, links that you can helpfully find another area then if you're wanting to work with a school or a child care director directly. Next slide. Coming up then should be our links to the website that we have that has resources listed in it. And we have a number of guidelines that we have set up here, whether it be one-page question and answers that is listed like here, our farm to plate how-tos. Also, there is some resources that include the informal bids, the checklist. Again, we do not require our programs to have the producers to have GAP certification, but we are encouraging that they use a checklist. We have our HACCP plans that are part of our meal operators programs, and so they then would have questions that they could work with a producer to answer those questions too. Donations are also an option, and so this is something that does give us guidance then on our website as far as if you have products, including meat products or produce products, that you would be interested in donating to our schools. We'll be sharing in some of the upcoming webinars then for the procurement webinars about how donations has made a difference in some of our child nutrition programs. So we encourage you to look at our website then at cnw.ksde.org under our Farm to Plate link then for guidance and resources that we would have there. Next slide. The next part of this, which is very important then too, is how we work then in our child nutrition programs then to incorporate the local areas of classroom, cafeteria, and community. So here in Kansas, we have the vision at Kansas Cans collaborate to procure and serve local foods in child nutrition programs to promote the learning and success of each child. This aligns with our KSDE vision for education. So in this vision for education, we are looking for more student focused. We want to have the students happy with the meals, happy with the things that we are providing then through our operators then to provide the support, the resources then for success. So we want to work together to make this happen. So through the Northeast Farm to School Institute, the lead at Vermont Feed, then at Shelburne Farms, we are working the programming that is centered then around the 3 C's for Farm to School. And that is classroom, cafeteria, and community. Each pillar must be engaged for the strongest projects and sustainability. The classroom includes participation from teachers and administrators. The cafeteria includes participation from food service staff, and the community represents the participation from various community supporters and partners, which may be many of you on the webinar today, that aid in the support of Farm to School and Farm to ECE. So next I'll share a few of the ways that this is happening currently in our state. First, in the classroom, you will see here several pictures of some of our grant projects that we have had. So studies have shown that when children learn more about food sourcing, they become more interested in trying new foods. We have used this through some of the grant projects that we have offered to our sponsors across the state. These have been for our schools, our child cares, and also our summer operators. You'll see here the tower gardens that were part of some grant projects that were happening across the state, also ag projects, garden projects, and then more of the ag programs, including the chickens, backyard chickens, and other areas too. So the nutrition, agriculture, education activities, I have found when there is an educator in our schools or in our ECE areas that is working with the school food service director or school nutrition operator then to make it the most successful then when those kids are working with our schools, with our child care areas and schools too. And next then is the cafeteria. And this is where we see with our eyes then the local products. We encourage marketing in the healthy meals that they are sharing again on the serving lines as far as where the access to the local foods has been from, where they've received those products. Again, the tray can be covered with local foods. And so there's a lot of opportunities there to do that. but also a lot of celebrations. And we're going to be sharing more about that a little bit later in today's webinar, because we do have farm to school celebrations happening in the month of October. We also have Kansas School Lunch Week in the month of October, and then also in other months of the year, there are several other opportunities for local food celebrations. The next then is the community. So with our community then, the community gardens, and these have actually been part of some of our grant projects, is the schools are working with the community garden areas. Also ag events. And we have had some great ag events from some of our schools that have invited the ag educators to work with them, but also to have then maybe producers come onto the schools or into the areas to go ahead and talk about their products and the things that they have. Or the kids could actually go on a field trip and go to the sites themselves. And you'll see some of our ECE operators here visiting one of our local places in Kansas then too as a field trip. And so this is a great opportunity too. Community events that we actually have had too have been some of those that have been through some of our farm and food councils and some of our conservation and education areas then too. And we are always happy to participate in those, to be able to tell about local food opportunities that they may have in their programs too. So each of these areas then too, the classroom, the cafeteria, and the communities are places that you each can go ahead and work with our child nutrition operators to be able to add local products. So that connection, that networking is very important then to go ahead and to teach our kids where food comes from. So coming up next are any questions that you guys might have regarding then about how local happens. And so we're here to answer questions for you. And I don't know if we have any, Rebecca, that you saw.
I haven't seen any in the chat, so if you do have any questions so far, I'd invite you to either unmute and ask out loud or put it in the chat. Lauren, I see you've raised your hand, so feel free to unmute and ask your question.
I was wondering, I produce sourdough bread for a local farmers market, and I'm just operating under the cottage food laws. And I was curious whether I would be able to supply sourdough bread for your program.
Yes, with that, what we would do would be want to work with you then on basically a nutrition breakdown that it would need to have a label, Lauren, and it may already have that. So it would be a label that our child nutrition programs would be able to use then to identify the ingredients and of course then the weight of the product, because that's how the grains are credited in our child nutrition programs. So we would be happy to work with you if you can identify your product that you have and send us some information, and to see if we could help connect you to any of the schools.
Okay, and who do I send the information to?
Just to myself or to Aaron here, so that we'll put our emails in the chat for you, and then we can begin that conversation.
Super, thank you very much. I appreciate your help.
Okay, I see there's a question in the chat from Lawana. Is there a need for farm fresh beef or beef snack sticks?
That's a good question. And the question about beef snacks and beef snack sticks is kind of the same as Lauren's was, is regarding the label. We would want to work then with the actual label of the product. The Smart Snack program is one that many of our schools work with to go ahead and use then creditable items that can be used then as part of the protein in the meal, or it can be also used as an a la carte or a separate sales area. So we do have some of our child nutrition operators that are currently purchasing beef sticks then as part of that protein, or as an a la carte snack stick items that they are selling then too. The other thing that fits very well is some of the fundraising that is happening currently in our child nutrition programs is including the snack sticks, the beef snack sticks. So we're excited to see, again, some of the healthier choice options that might be a fundraiser. So again, we're happy to work with you then. If you have a labeled product that we could go ahead and maybe introduce to some of your schools in your area.
All right. So if you've got additional questions as we continue, I see that Andrea has joined us, so we will move ahead to her presentation. But if you have questions for the presenters, feel free to put them into the chat as we move forward. And I know Andrea will only be able to be with us for the 30 minutes. And so, but I think Barb and Aaron will be able to answer most any question that you might have if Andrea has to leave before we get to that. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Andrea.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for being a minute or two late here. I'm jumping from meeting to meeting today, but so excited to be with you for a half an hour. And I apologize in advance if I'm repeating anything from what was said earlier, because I would have loved to be here for the whole thing, but here we are. We're going to talk a little bit just about some local procurement basics, but I framed it a little bit as pro tips. So kind of some ways to approach local procurement that can maybe help with your thinking to make it easier or cost less or that sort of mindset. So next slide, please. Oh, and by the way, my name is Andrea Alma, and I'm the Farm to School Regional Specialist for USDA in our Mountain Plains Regional Office. So I'm based in Denver, and that office covers Kansas. So I get to work with Kansas. I often work with Barb and Aaron to support some of the state level farm to school work in the state. So we are going to talk about local procurement, and local procurement can, of course, span the tray or the foods and the meal components that schools offer, but it also spans our child nutrition programs. We know it's called Farm to Plate there in Kansas. It really, the things I'm going to talk about are relevant to school meals, but also summer meals, childcare meals, summer. Yeah, I said summer. All of that. Can anyone guess how much schools spent in the state of Kansas last year on food for lunches? Over a course of the year, how much did all of Kansas schools spend on food for lunch, school lunch? Type in the chat. Any guesses? Anyone be right? I'm seeing some baffled faces. That's great. I'll help you out. So there were 48.5 million lunches served at schools in Kansas last year. And I used a multiplier of $2 per meal that's spent on food. That may be a little high, but I think it kind of depends. But if we say $2 a meal on food, that is $97 million, or almost $1 billion. Well, no, not almost $1 billion. I got that. No, 97 million, which is still a very, very big number. So almost $100 million was spent on food by schools. So when we're talking procurement of food for schools, that's a big dollar amount. And so as we think about procuring local in school meals, there's a lot of money on the table here when we're talking about the impact that we could have on our Kansas food economy. Okay, next slide, please. Anyone heard of any cool local procurement happenings in your area? Could you drop one in the chat and we could just sort of get this started with a little exciting what's happening now? Anyone heard of anything local happening for purchasing in your area? I'll let you populate these for just a minute. Maybe just quick, like honey or wheat flour, whatever. Ooh, Salmon Enterprises local beef. Nice. Awesome. Anyone else? Always good to see local beef in our beef states. Ooh, local beef in a couple of places. Okay, very good. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about beef today, but we'll also talk about some other products too. All right, next slide, please. So, what we're going to talk about here is, the price that a producer or a processor or meat processor charges for their products depends on the market, but in this case, it's when we're talking about local food, it's very tied to the cost of production. That producers and food manufacturers obviously want to make a living, and so charging more than it costs them to make their products is obviously how you stay in business. Some of their costs will be fixed, but there are a number of variable costs that are dependent on the product, of course. So the costs of making beef are very different than making a sweet corn. And those costs are also different based on the customer type, so how that customer behaves. So when we're talking about local food generally, we have labor. Local food production is very labor intensive. It also requires these inputs like pest control and production costs, the cost to market those local products, the cost of delivery. And then an added factor here is risk. How likely am I going to actually be able to show up and make a sale? And producers have to kind of pad their pricing for that. Next slide, or next. Hopefully something will show up on the screen. Good, it did. If those costs that I just read out there, those drive the price up, right? If something is more labor intensive to produce, the producer is going to have to charge a higher price for that, obviously. And then the way that we would, let's say as a school with limited funds available to buy local, how would we get that price down? The two primary ways we would do that is to reduce that risk of the producer or to increase the volume and get some economies of scale going on these inputs here. So next slide, please. Let's just talk, for example, about how this might work with a farmer's market. Labor costs for a farmer's market are really high. A lot of harvesting, a lot of different products may be coming to your stand. There is somebody physically standing out there, driving and standing out there, every Saturday or what have you. And that product has to look beautiful, well packaged, blemish free for those discerning eyes at the farmer's market. And then there's the risk that maybe it's going to rain that Saturday and then you won't really make as many sales, right? Next slide, please. What about a producer that's selling to a restaurant? They may get some economies of scale in the labor if they're making, bigger sales, but your marketing costs may be high. You don't just have everyone coming to the farmer's market, but you have to be out there making those restaurants or grocery stores put their orders in. You may have to deliver. And there may be risk as well if a restaurant has been ordering from you and all of a sudden they stop doing that. So next slide, please. I give these examples of a restaurant and a farmer's market because we're talking about child nutrition program operators. And child nutrition program operators are very different than either of those, but act similarly in some ways. So if I'm a school and let's say I want perfect, beautiful, blemish-free products. Well, then I'm acting a little bit like a restaurant, or like a farmer's market there. Maybe I'm acting like a restaurant by only placing orders just in time, and the producer doesn't necessarily know if I'm going to make another order. So we kind of want to take some of these elements of acting like a farmer's market and acting like a restaurant, but really find ways to increase the volume and bring down the risk so that we don't have to pay farmers market prices and we don't have to pay restaurant prices, because as a child nutrition program operator, we can't afford that. So we need to act a little bit differently. Next slide, please. So practically speaking, how do we make this work? How do we not pay restaurant and farmers market prices, but still get great local products for our child nutrition programs? So next slide, please. One tool that we now have in our toolbox to do this is called geographic preference. Now, this is part of an interpretation of a law. It's now the law of the land that child nutrition program operators can use the term local or Kansas grown or grown in my county or grown within 100 miles of, you know, my town or my office, as a specification or requirement. So schools can now do this. We've always had an option for schools to allow this as a preference. Like I would prefer Kansas grown products, and kind of if all else is equal, I'll go with the Kansas product. But now, as of July 1st of this year, schools and child nutrition program operators can require that to be local, as long as it doesn't unduly limit competition. So this is a great tool we now have in our toolbox. Next slide, please. But let's talk about some other strategies for how to get local products without it costing us an arm and a leg. We talked about increasing volumes, economies of scale. We don't want, when we get caught in the cycle as a child nutrition program offer of what I like to call dabbling in farm to school, where maybe you buy a little bit here and a little bit there, you really are acting like a farmer's market shopper or even a restaurant, a finicky restaurant. And unfortunately, to stay afloat, because you're not buying in very high volumes, the producer or the meat processor, what have you, may have to charge you a higher price for that. Now, higher volume doesn't necessarily have to be all in one shot. Like you don't have to buy 10,000 pounds of beef all in one time, but what we're talking about is maybe lining up with a processor to say, I'd like to buy beef from you once a month, and I'd like to buy 300 pounds of ground beef every month, as opposed to I'd like 100 pounds delivered tomorrow. You may or may not see me again. I also want to note here that bigger buyers are more important to vendors. You know, if I'm a customer at let's say at a meat processor and I'm buying every month, do you think I might have a preference against someone who maybe only had one small sale? If something goes wrong or if there's limited supply, they might take care of me a little better because I'm the one who's promising to buy that product for, you know, a good bit of time. Next slide, please. Now I'm just going to go through an example of how this might look in practice. So this is a sample solicitation. So this is a sample bit of information about a product that a school district is looking for, ground beef from Montana, for in this case a fictional school year of this past school year, or this, you know, this current school year. I want grass-fed grain finished beef. It can be fresh or frozen, 15 10-pound rolls per month. Ensure that approximate, you know, you have to assure the appropriate time and temperature control, deliver once a month, blah, 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 blah. So what elements of this are attempting to increase the volume to get a better price? Next slide, please. I did the work for you here. So this school district said, we want to look at a whole entire school year and therefore have a larger volume that we're talking about. We want to do 15, you know, rolls per month, and we want that delivery once per month. So there's kind of going to be a bigger delivery, and we're not talking about smaller deliveries every week. So just a couple strategies here that this buyer is using to increase the volumes and then therefore get a better price than if they just walked into that shop and made a quick purchase, right? Next slide, please. Here's another example. Red potatoes for the intended use of dicing, roasting, or mashed potatoes. We're looking at, you know, as long as possible through storage as well. A couple of different notes there about what we're looking for, and 16 50-pound cases per month. So next slide, please. Again, we've got a couple of different instances where this buyer is looking to increase those volumes. Okay, I remember why I highlighted that first one. Dyson roasted and mashed potatoes. This buyer is thinking ahead. They're thinking about the multiple ways that they can use a versatile potato to increase their volumes, right? They're combining a mashed potato and a Dyson roasted. Not sure I would mash red potatoes, but you know, that's up to them. But what they're trying to do is thinking about combining multiple uses and therefore increasing the volume of that sale. So they're not buying russets and white potatoes and red potatoes. They're kind of consolidating here on red potatoes. Again, looking out at next school year, such a great strategy for increasing the volume, packed in 50-pound cases or bulk reusable bins. And again, that per month delivery, because they seem to have the capacity to do that. Next slide, please. The next strategy here that we want to talk about is planning in advance. So a lot of schools will, oh, October comes around, it's farm to school month. We need to buy local. So they go out and try and find something local, and maybe they do, maybe they're like, oh, well, we'll splurge this time, right? Because we have to do it for farm to school month. But in reality, if we can plan in advance, then we don't have to come to October and then maybe pay an arm and a leg for a local product and then be like, gosh, well, I can never afford that again. You know, I'm not doing that again. No. If we plan in advance and we can kind of map out our needs and discuss those with our producers during the market research and menu planning process, and then write those down into solicitations and get that out into the world and really have and lock in with producers, then we can really start to see some cost savings. And you can see mapped here how the summer and fall is really the busiest time for producers. It's often the busiest time for child nutrition program operators too. But there are products available, and I only included produce on here to just help us think differently about what's available when, if we can really plan out season extension and storage into our discussions. Next slide, please. So this solicitation here really did plan in advance, right? They thought about school year, when they're going to be menuing ground beef and how frequently, and therefore they were able to kind of consolidate that into this ask to producers. Next slide, please. And this one here, they were thinking in advance, again, of what they're going to actually use the product for, but also similarly, the bulk cases and the cases per month and how frequently they're going to need deliveries. So next slide, please. And then this is your third strategy. How can we find flexibilities and creative cost savings? We showed that slide earlier of all the different costs that come to a producer who's trying to grow and raise a product for you. And how can we be creative and help them find some cost savings on their end, but also find some cost savings on our end on the school side of things in order to bring down the price and make it work. Here are some examples I'm going to share. In the upper left is a butternut squash producer. She and she's sitting next to the food service director. So she grew butternut squash specifically for the school district that were enormous. The school district had some processing capacity, so they were able to get a great yield on that product. But she actually didn't really sort her large butternuts. They were just big. They were kind of, you know, bendy. big end, straight, you know, whatever. She didn't have to sort to just get the, you know, beautiful, small, little, perfect butternut squashes. She harvested them directly into bins. She did not put a sticker on a single one of them. And therefore, in finding those cost savings and then that yield savings, they were able to find a good price. The second one here, this school district wanted kale. And that is a great season extension product. You can see it's snowing. But what my point is here is that the kale producers were actually bunching all the kale. And then the school district was unbunching the kale as soon as it arrived to their door. This extra labor of bunching and then unbunching costs money, right? Labor is money, time is money. So they were able to find a way to bulk pack that kale into a bin and therefore save time on both ends and get a better price. Recognize when to mechanize. So Ginger here in the bottom right, was able to invest in a patty maker and using those grant funds to make smart investments to be able to use local products at reduced labor, you know, to the school district is a great strategy for saving costs. That grant money is out there. I know it's not always the easiest to get a hold of, but I know Barb and the team have a lot of mini grant opportunities through KSDE that might be really great for helping you think about, okay, how can I mechanize a process to save labor and therefore save time and money? This school district on the bottom left did the same thing. They were painfully cubing all of these beautiful local cantaloupes. They decided to switch that up and just serve the slices with the skin on, right? A great labor saving opportunity to then be able to afford that labor to do something else. And then they don't have to spend that precious resource on this local product. So again, finding those creative cost savings on both sides. The orange little flags are showing us where in the solicitation they've tried to do that. Beef fresh or frozen. That's a great flexibility that allows the producer a little wiggle room to, you know, get you that product at a better price. 80-20 fat content or leaner, right? So we're not requiring them to do exactly 80-20, but we will take it if it's a little bit leaner, right? These, ensuring appropriate time and temperature control. What this is telling us is that I'm not requiring a refrigerated truck if this is a smaller vendor, but if they have the appropriate way to keep that product cool, such as coolers in a way that meets my requirements, I will allow that. And these are ways that this school is being more flexible to find those, you know, meet them where they're at and find those cost savings. Next slide, please. Okay, some other examples here. Telling the vendor what you're using that product for is a very helpful way to figure out if they can maybe save some labor or find a way to grow that product cheaper for you, right? If I want a cucumber, but I'm not using that cucumber whole, right? I'm dicing it or I'm slicing it. It doesn't need to be a perfect, beautiful cucumber, right? If I'm dicing and roasting a potato, it doesn't have to be all exactly the same size and beautiful. And that is a money saver on the farm end, right? Grade A preferred, grade B accepted potatoes, no grading required. You know, these types of cosmetic imperfections are acceptable. These are different ways that, you know, that this school district is trying to be flexible. And again, through their conversations with producers, they've found these creative ways to save money and time. They're not requiring, you know, GAP, a good agricultural practice. They're being a little more flexible with their food safety requirements. So again, these strategies for increasing volumes, planning in advance, and creative cost savings and flexibility when we can kind of combine as a trifecta to help us actually get some products at the right price. So let's see here. Next slide. Really, I'm gonna come back to planning in advance. This takes a lot of work. It's harder to do all this advanced planning and mapping, and we don't have the time and capacity, and that is in many cases also true, or we don't have the producers in our area. But doing like really honing in on this phase of like over the winter, maybe when you have a moment to breathe as a child nutrition professional, are there ways to get out there and start having these conversations? This is what will actually get you the right price, let's say, or actually find a vendor who might work with you to find those cost savings. And they can grow with you. They may be small or just starting. And if you start those conversations over the winter, we're coming into the perfect time for this. That's where we can really find our sweet spot. Next slide, please. And ideally, if we take some of these approaches, we can start small. We can start with a one-time purchase. But let's say that worked out well. Let's start to have those conversations. So next clicky there. So we can build momentum from there. We can build a couple of suppliers who are working with us. Maybe we started with someone and we want to even increase our volumes with that individual producer. Finding finding the trust and building the relationship and even skills among our staff to get this rolling. We finally can get to a place where local procurement can actually be woven into our regular way of doing business. But there's a critical step here, which is right now, buying local is not the norm, right? It is hard. It is not staring us right in the face, right? And so next click, please. We really do need to think about, we're going to have to change the system, unfortunately. And the way we do that is with higher volumes and more creativity, more partnerships, and we can actually start to change the way that producers see schools as a buyer. So next slide, please. That was the end of my presentation here. And I want to address some of the conversation in the chat here of broadline distributors have some local, trying to understand the market niche, potatoes not needing to be graded. Yeah, so here's an example. Actually, I used to work for a school district, and we would buy potatoes and we would buy the bigger, like slightly bigger potatoes. And this grower would sell those small potatoes to the grocery store, right? In the bags, like the cute little bags of these perfect little potatoes. But nobody, you don't go to the grocery store and want gigantic red potatoes, right? So when you can kind of find a producer who's growing a product and they have a market channel for a more expensive, sale, and maybe there is a product that they can grow within that schematic that can actually be a less expensive sale to the school. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to jump on, correct me if I'm being confusing here. All right, I have time for like a question or two. I'm curious if anyone has any questions, and I didn't talk a ton about like, oh, well, how do we find farmers and things like that, but Barb and Erin can help you out with that. I just wanted to kind of give you some food for thought for how to make this work. Any questions?
Andrea, just maybe quickly explaining micro purchases.
Yeah, so can you go back, please, a couple slides to the one, yeah, just 2 slides actually. Yeah. So a micro purchase is a purchase that a school or a child nutrition program operator can make by just going out and doing it. And they can do that with purchases that are less than $10,000, with procurements that are less than $10,000. So depending on the instance, a school, especially a small school, can really do this for several of their purchases over the course of a year. And oftentimes a micro purchase is kind of a just-in-time purchase. So you'll see that at the top of this screen here, it's kind of a purchase that can be done just in time as you need it. It's sometimes reserved for maybe more emergencies, but in some of the smaller districts, it's kind of how they get most of their food. The requirements are just that that purchase be reasonable, and then that purchase be that we equitably distribute those purchases ideally among qualified vendors. Now, what I was talking about today is thinking less of a school thinking less about acting in the micro purchase mindset, but thinking a little bit more about how can I map out my purchases? How can I get to bigger volumes so that, you know, Lauren, who's making bread, can maybe grow with me and reach a scale where her price point and what I can pay as a school can align. Yes, Lauren, yes. I think what you're describing is kind of why we're talking about price. Nutrition and getting high quality food to the children is at the core of this concept, but so often we hear that schools say, I can't afford to do it. And so that's why we really had this why I chose to focus on price, because the school wants to do it. They care about the nutrition. They care about getting that quality food, but they're like, I just can't afford this. So the presentation today was a little bit about how can we find creative ways to afford what we all want to do?
Andrea, I'm interested to find out, are there any programs that have done this kind of mapping for school districts, for cafeteria programs, so that they can do this kind of planning?
Yes, and I think there are both informal and formal examples of this. Something as simple as, yeah, just speaking with farmers at the farmers market to see if there's anyone who wants to provide potatoes next year could be an example of this. But then there's also like writing it down in a more comprehensive and formal solicitation to producers. We have examples of those as well. So Barb knows where to find me. I'm happy to give you like very tangible, you know, documentation of where this has been done. There's actually some really great beef to school templates available from the state of Montana. And that might be relevant in the case you're talking about if we're talking about beef. So I guess the answer is yes, and it can be both kind of more informal or a little bit more formal or intense.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Andrea, for sharing with us today. I think we are ready to move on to the next part of our presentation today, which I'll pass it back over to Barb or Erin. Not sure who's going to share this next part.
Yes, thank you to Andrea. That was amazing. She's a great resource for us at the state agency, so we're very thankful for her expertise. I will be talking about some different opportunities and activities that we have here in Kansas that we've offered out of our office. So just to highlight a few things that we've done recently to promote farm to plate across the state, we have offered a local Meat for Schools grant. This was a USDA funded grant that was administered through our office to give school districts across the state the opportunity to purchase local meats. So we began this program in May of 2023, and it'll run until December of 2024. So we've heard some really great success stories from districts that have purchased local meat. About 71% of districts across the state chose to participate. So we were really happy with those results, and we've heard some great success of local Kansas produced meat going into our schools across the state. We also have been hosting regional farm tours as of last year was the first inaugural year that we offered these. And we are in the midst of doing them right now too. So we've hosted two the last 2 weeks, and then we will be wrapping up with the final farm tour this Friday. So right here in the middle as we are giving this presentation as well. So we have split up the state of Kansas in different regions. And so last year we visited the Northeast, the South Central, and Northwest parts of the state. And this year we are visiting the Southwest, Southeast, and North Central parts of the state. So these farm tours are a one-day tour where we take child nutrition professionals to local farms to have them network with the farmer, see the farm, and really make those connections. And then we also provide education and really conversation around purchasing local to inspire child nutrition professionals to purchase local. That's the hope anyway. So we've heard some great success stories from these tour. They've been really fun to participate in. And we've seen some good local food purchases come from those. And a very new and exciting opportunity that we have is the Harvest of the Month program that is launching this month during Farm to School Month. Each month, a Kansas-grown commodity will be celebrated by different promotional items that we have offered through our office, such as some posters and static clings that can go on the serving lines or windows if it's in a childcare setting, some stickers that can be handed out to the kiddos, and then a newsletter that can go home to parents. And we're also offering STEM curriculum. So that's the big development here out of our office. We've worked with our other KSDE friends here to develop some curriculum. Right now we'll be offering pre-K through 5th grade, but we do have 6th through 12th grade curriculum in the works too. So we're really excited to be offering that for our classroom so that the local food promotion goes beyond the classroom, or I'm sorry, beyond the cafeteria. Next slide, please. An exciting update as well is that our office was awarded a 2024 Farm to School grant funded by USDA. And so what we'll be doing with those funds is we are going to subgrant them to our sponsors across the state. And by sponsor, I mean our child nutrition professionals. We call them sponsors internally, sponsors of the program. So in October, applications will be launching for funding for child nutrition operators to expand or create new farm to play activities. We do have $2,500 available for expansion of current farm to school projects, and then up to $10,000 available for new projects implementing farm to play programming. So this could be any kind of school gardens, either a child care center or a school district wants to implement. We've had some school districts in the past incorporate local school farms. So they've had hogs on site where their FFA program raises these hogs, and then that meat goes directly back into the school nutrition program. This could be tower gardens, just a variety of things to help bring farm to plate into those areas. The subgrant project applicants will need to form a group of at least 4 for their projects. So this includes food service, administration, educators, and community to participate. So that's really what Barb had mentioned about the 3 C's earlier, the classroom, cafeteria, and community, just really strengthening that farm to plate programming to sustain throughout the years. Next slide, please. The Farm to School Institute will be coming up here in November. The Kansas State Department of Education has partnered with the Nebraska and Missouri Departments of Education to host a Farm to School and ECE Institute, ECE being Early Child Care and Education. So Nebraska is going to be hosting this first round here in November 13th through 15th, just next month here. And it'll be focused on early child care. And so really that these nutrition professionals that apply and have been accepted in the program, they will be coming to a retreat where they get to really dive deep with their team and make some farm to plate programming for whatever project they want to implement with the assistance of a coach, and then the assistance of all 3 of our state agencies and partners as well, to really dive deep and make those plans. And then they are followed for an entire year afterwards to help give support to their projects and really see those through fruition. So we are starting this year with ECEs, and then in May of 2025, Kansas will be hosting, and we will be hosting school districts. So same concept, school districts will come to this retreat, really nail down what projects they want to implement, and then we will provide technical assistance throughout the year following to help them implement those plans. Missouri will host in 2026, and we are thinking that'll be a dual farm to ECE and farm to school institute, so both categories there. Next slide, please. Culinary coaches are a new thing coming out of the Child Nutrition and Wellness Office this year. So these culinary coaches are going to be available for child nutrition program operators to request that they come on site to learn different culinary skills to help prepare scratch and speed scratch recipes. This isn't directly narrowed down to local foods. However, we feel that this will help increase the use of local foods if they have the culinary skills to, chop and dice and do all the preparation that they need to when they're getting whole product rather than something that may already have that preparation from, your typical vendors. So if you're interested in seeing the culinary coaches in your area, you can contact Holly Steinlage. She works here in our office and her email is placed on the slide. Next slide, please. And I will pass it back to Barb at this time, and she's going to talk about some other resources available.
Thank you, Erin. And as Andrea explained some of the how-tos of the farm to school and farm to ECE programs and purchasing, there is some great resources that the Farm to School Network does have under USDA.gov. And this is one that we have used for some of our education, some of our classrooms. It's the Farm to School Toolkit. It talks a lot about the team effort that it takes to make your child nutrition programs and success then in the farm to school area. So this is a great resource that we feel is out there. And another resource at the national level then is the fact sheets that are available. So there are a number of these that are available then also at the website, so that you can use these to basically get information of how to start or how to use different types of local products in your programs in different times of the year. So this is again where we use these resources and use these in trainings as well as then any of the education that we have. So just encourage you to look into that. And then we just want to see success. And this is the best parts of our job that we have, is when we see kids that are happy eating local products. And many of the stories that we get are from the child nutrition operators that tell about how much their participation has increased because they've had local foods. The kids know where their food comes from. In some of these smaller districts, they know the families that it comes from. And so that the healthy eating habits that happen as a result of local purchasing. As Andrea had explained, was the how-tos, but the biggest part is the communication, I feel, as far as how the connections happen. Again, whether you're going to the producer or you as the producer is coming to the child nutrition operator to have those conversations. So with that, this month being Farm to School Month is a great time to go ahead and make that happen. So we really push local in the month of October. There's a lot of products that you can get out there that are local in the fall season. There's schools and child nutrition areas that are year-round able to purchase things like the flour that they could use in their baking. It could be the milk that is always there. Sometimes fall produce, again, is available now to be able to do this. But actually then the meats that Erin spoke about, that is something year-round, and we want sustainability, and that's what Andrea was speaking of too. But this is a great place to start, is with Farm to School Month. So the next slide is going to tell how each of you can help us make that happen, because each October we have a friendly competition with our neighboring states that you'll see here on the slide then to crunch on something local. So we encourage you to use the resource here. There's a QR code. There's also a link, and that is a link that will got shared now in the chat, that you can register when you are crunching on any product local. Produce is great, apples, October, but there's more produce out there, but there's also other products. And this year we are including things like those beef sticks that you were mentioning earlier, also grains in your baked items that you have. So that again, anytime you're getting together as a meeting coming up, as a family, as an organizational event that might be happening in October, you can register from October 1 through the 31st for the crunch off. So we need your numbers. We really want you to help us make Kansas, you know, proud of the number of crunches that we have across the state. So plan on crunching. We really want you to encourage to love local food and to have local products available out there and look for them. So we're here to help if you need any questions then.
Yeah, time for more questions. Or does anybody want to share any other challenges or successes you've seen?
Tom has a question.
Well, I was just wondering here, since we have two webinars going after this that will both be in the month of October, if we could have a little crunch off. I got my local apple here. I went
Good for
and got
you.
that. We could have a crunch off next week or on the 14th.
Let's plan to crunch at each the 7th and the 14th. I will take care of the registration for that. Thank you very much, with the help of Rebecca to know how many people are going to be crunching with us. But yes, plan on bringing your local crunchable item with you. Thank you, Tom.
Barb doesn't miss an opportunity to crunch.
We're crunching at our farm tour also this
Uh-huh.
Friday, so we'll make opportunities happen. Yes. And you guys can each do the same. We really encourage you to do that. And I just do want to put a teaser out that for the next week, then we will have those success stories, more of them to share with you with that. I see the question regarding the reimbursement prices then. And so that is something that each of the school districts, yes, based on the number of reimbursable meals that they provide then for a paid, a reduced, and then a free price that they are receiving then that amount of reimbursement then too. And there are some of our districts out there that are community eligible participating schools, and so that they are all their percentages based on that community eligibility then is also being funded then. And we do have all of that information on our child nutrition website as far as the reimbursement rates. We also have our monthly updates on our website that includes any of the updates it's for everyone. It's out there for all. And so we will be putting one of those out this week then that will have then all of the special events and opportunities that Erin had described then for grant opportunities that we have there. So.
And next week we'll have more about the meal program perspectives. You want to share a little teaser for next week, Barb?
Well, we actually have an opportunity coming up that we will be using some of our our program operators that have done some great things then to share not only with our state board here, but also with those that are coming to our webinar next week. And so a lot of that will be related to the local foods for schools that Erin described, but just practices that they have actually done themselves. And so they're making it happen, but many of them have made it happen then with the support then of the administration that they have, but also in the community. On one of the slides, it had the hashtag fueling KS Kids. And I really encourage everyone to, if you use Facebook or social media, to go there and to be able to go ahead and see some of the success stories that are being shared then by some of our champion districts across the state and champion program operators in ECE. So that that's a great place to look to get happy to see good things.
Excellent. So we hope you all can join us again next week. And of course, tell all of your friends and partners it's not too late to join us. If you have others you want to tell to come next week, they can totally join us then, and they can still register for that. I think we have just a few contact for Barb and Erin. I believe Rebecca shared that in the chat earlier, but of course, reach out if you have any questions. Are always available to be support for you all.
Yes, and Lawana,
Other-
thank you for sharing in the chat, I see. And so that, yes, please do reach out to us. And we do keep a list of producers here by the regions then in the state that we know that are available and interested in working with local schools. We want to thank KDA also, because as their new from the Land of Kansas members register, they do express whether they're interested in working with our schools. So we have some lists there also. So that, yes, we'll be happy to go ahead and help you out with some resources for fundraising.
All right, then I'm going to launch our closing poll. So hope you all can participate in that. So again, the first question, how much new information did you learn in this webinar? Hopefully you learned something, but it's okay if you didn't. Maybe you're already the expert. The second question, do you have a better understanding of farm to school terminology and concepts after this webinar? And the third question, how likely are you to work with farm to school efforts as a result of this webinar? All right, looks like we got just about everyone. Share those results. So it looks like everyone pretty much learned maybe a lot or some new information. So that's awesome. We're glad that this was good information for you. Everybody, yes, we got all yeses, one unsure about having a better understanding. So that sounds like we did a pretty good job at sharing that info, and seems like everyone is pretty likely, very likely to maybe somewhat likely to participate, to work with farm to school efforts in the future. All right. And that's all we have for today. So again, thank you all for coming. We're so glad you could be a part of our first Farm to School webinar here, and we hope you'll join us next week. Thank you all.